We do not have President Biden's birth time. This is hugely important. We cannot predict what's going to happen with him. This is why you never see me posting any charts of President Biden. I do not trust the charts that are out there because they are not his actual birth time. He is so old that birth certificates were not required by the hospital. Like the hospital wasn't required to put birth time on his birth certificate. So the charts that are out there have been rectified. What that means is an astrologer, and they're all tropical astrology chart rectifications, by the way. So what it means is a tropical astrologer has gone out there and looked at the events of his life and tried to figure out what they think that his birth time is. And they've settled on the fact that they think that he's a Scorpio rising. I don't personally think that he's a Scorpio rising because it would match up, like the time that is set out there with that rectification. If I put it into Vedic astrology, it should line up with all of the events that happen in his life according to what we call the Vimshotri Dasha system. So this is something, if you're interested in studying Vedic astrology, I go into this in my Fundamentals of Vedic Astrology course. You will learn towards the end of the course how to do birth chart rectification. And it is using the Vimshotri Dasha system, which is the unfolding of planetary karma in our life. Events should line up perfectly with that Dasha system and with transits that are going on in the sky at the time that those events were happening. Like if those events were happening in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, like the events should line up perfectly. And when I take the time that everybody's using of this Scorpio chart that's been rectified out there, it does not line up with the Vimshotri Dasha system. So I don't trust it. And I don't know enough about Biden to rectify the chart myself. I've tried, and I don't think he's a Scorpio rising at all. He may be a Libra, may be a Virgo, but I'm really not sure. I need to know more about his life and him personally, and I don't. There's another chart that floats around out there that is said to be from Biden's memory of what he thinks his birth time is, and that is so faulty. Not only because it's coming from Biden, but this is one of the cases where like people will say, oh, my mom told me that my birth time was this. And then I always say to them, have you looked at your birth certificate? And then when they actually look at their birth certificate, it's like an hour off. That happens all the time. You can't trust your own memory. I've even had clients tell me, oh, my birth time is this. And then I said, okay, and this is what's on your birth certificate. And they're like, oh, I know it's right, but I'll check my birth certificate. And they check their birth certificate and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I checked my birth certificate. My birth time was 30 minutes off or an hour off. So I don't trust memory either. So I don't trust any of the charts that are out there for President Biden, which is why I don't use them, which is why I never show his chart. The only chart that I can look at is Donald Trump's chart. And this is why I use Donald Trump's chart a lot when there's things going on with Donald Trump. And I can look at Donald Trump's chart and I can tell you he's about to get very strong, as I have mentioned. I told you he was going to take this, assassination attempt and he was going to spin it in his favor. And it's exactly what he's done. It's made him stronger. What I can tell you about what is coming is that there is definitely a change coming in the White House. And if I had to guess, I would say that I don't think President Biden is going to be in office. So this is the United States chart. You can see that the United States is at the ascendant is 8 degrees Sagittarius, which means the United States is a Mula Sagittarius rising chart in Vedic sidereal astrology. And I've done many videos about how this Mula Ardra axis in the United States chart really is apparent every 18 and a half years when we have a major catastrophe like we did with 2020 with COVID. That's a whole separate story. I've done stories about that on my page, but this is why I believe we're Mula. So what I want you to notice, though, is right now we have Rahu transiting the 4th house. Rahu transiting the fourth house brings unexpected things. Rahu is like unpredictable, unexpected, unpredictable, out of the box things, random things, things that are out of the ordinary and that are very unusual that are happening in the White House, which that is what the fourth house is in the United States natal chart. It's the White House. And we have Ketu right here at the south node of the moon, transiting the 10th house of the office of the presidency. That right there leads me to believe that the current president that's sitting in the office while this Dasha is running is not going to remain there. Usually when people have Ketu in their 10th house by transit, and I see that in a transit chart, if I'm doing a year ahead or something like that, it generally means that their career is going to be disrupted, that they are leaving their career, that they are searching for a new career, that they might lose their job, that they're going to be disconnected from their career in some kind of way. It usually doesn't mean that they're going to stay in their job. There's a lot of astrologers that have come out and said that they don't think that Biden's going to make it because something's going to happen to him, like really bad's going to happen to him that will make Kamala have to become the president. That could be seen by the Saturn conjunct Ketu. That's usually like kind of a tragic signature right there. However, we've already passed it. So Ketu is at 16 degrees and Ketu goes retrograde. So it's moving closer and closer to Leo where it's going to be. So I'm actually not worried about that. I don't think anything tragic is going to happen to Biden while he's in office. What I think could happen is he could really step down. What I think could happen is he could get replaced, or he could step down willingly, or he could get replaced, or, which I think would also be him stepping down technically, he'd have to agree to it, or he doesn't win the election and somebody new takes over the White House. That would be what the Rahu would be. And the only other person I can think that would be Trump, unless there's a new Democrat that steps in. That is also a potential. So I've been holding off on predicting who I think is going to win the election because I don't know that the Democratic president that we have right now is going to be the Democratic candidate that actually runs against Trump. Because again, Biden could step down, get replaced. That could be why he leaves the White House and leaves his presidency. Or we get a new, Democratic candidate in, and the office could change over. And maybe that candidate wins and Democrats stay. Or maybe that candidate loses and Trump gets in office. Or maybe, Biden stays and Trump wins and gets into office. But what I do not see is Biden being the president next year. I would be very surprised if he's the president next year. I either think Donald Trump is going to be president next year, or we're going to have a new Democratic president next year. I don't think it's going to be Biden. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think so. Not with that K2 there. So we'll have to wait and see. But this is why I haven't come out and been showing charts of President Biden, because I don't believe that that's his chart. I just don't believe it.